Okay, we will start. Now we'll start with this topic, nature of Indian federal system. Guys, actually today I don't have that pen to write, so I will not be writing anything today. We will have the discussion, okay? And this is a direct topic, simple topic. You can expect a prelims question as well as, and this is something which can be asked in mains. Most importantly, the main focus is actually for the mains, what type of system we have, whether it is federal, whether it is unitary, and there are discussions like it is quasi-federal or it is federal with unitary bias, okay? So but Supreme Court has interpreted that federalism is actually the basic feature of the Indian Constitution. So we will see what exactly is the nature. We will see the arguments in favor of federal setup. We will also see the arguments in favor for unitary setup, and then we will go for the conclusion. We will say that it's a federation with some unitary bias, or we will say that it's a typical type of federal system and it is unique in nature. So we have a federalism which is sui generis. Sui generis means something which comes into existence its own automatically. It's not exactly federal like USA. At the same time, it may not be unitary exactly like Britain or Japan, okay? So, or France. So we will see what kind of setup we have, and I'll tell you what you should be writing in the conclusion. Now before that, main difference, this is a theoretical part. What you can see in this table is actually the main difference between federal and unitary system, okay? So if you see now, do you remember when we discussed about 1919 Government of India Act and also 1935 Government of India Act, we have discussed about diarchy. Okay, so what do you mean by diarchy? Diarchy is again rule of two, but that is at the same level. Okay, and at that time I have told you, when I say diarchy, that is rule of two, archy means rule, diarchy means rule of two, but at the same level. 1919 diarchy was at the provincial level, 1935 provincial autonomy and diarchy was introduced at the central level. And when, in which act the concept of federation came into existence? It is in the 1935 Government of India Act. So when I say federation, the main thing that you need to understand is it is again rule of two, but at the different level. Diarchy, rule of two at the same level. For example, when we discussed about provincial level, when I have told you 1919 provincial level diarchy was introduced, rule of two at the provincial level, governor is there, elected ministers was there. Similarly 1935 when I talk about diarchy, what was that? Rule of two at the same level, at the central level, viceroy was there, at the same time elected ministers was there. But here when I say federal system or federal government, this is again rule of two, but at the different level. One at the central level, or you will see this first point, that is at the national government or the central government, and the other is at the regional level or the provincial level or the state level. So when I talk about federal setup, there will be dual government, two government, one at the central level, other at the provincial or the state level. So central government and the state government. That is one most important feature. On the other hand, if you see unitary, single government, right? So that is a national government only, which may create regional governments. Now when we talk about the single government like in Britain and all, there may be like regional governments, but those are not like independent in its own. They are like administrative arm of the national government only, okay? Similarly, when it comes to federal government, the second feature you can see, it's a written constitution. So things has to be written and codified. What do you mean by written constitution? It is codified clearly, the rules and laws and everything. So if it is a federal setup, see, both are deriving the power from where? There is no one who is inferior here. The central government or the state government, both are not inferior, both are having their own power, and which is drawn from the constitution, and that is the reason why it has to be essentially written constitution in federal setup. On the other hand, in unitary, it can be written or it can be unwritten. Written, you can see example as France, and unwritten, Britain. Guys, just 1 minute. Similarly, the third one, if you see, division of power between the national and the regional level. So division of power again is clearly there in the constitution. So when it comes to India, we will see 7th schedule. there will be a union list, there will be a state list, there will be a concurrent list. Okay, and in the union list, the union will make the laws. State list, the state will make the laws. Concurrent list, the both will make law, that is concurrent, that will go parallel. And then the residuary power is with the center. So that residuary power, we will say that it is with the center to support, there is a unitary bias. Okay. So on the other hand, if you see, there is no clear-cut division of power. That is actually not required if it is unitary setup. Supremacy of the constitution. See, the constitution is supreme, and the constitution has to be supreme because both derive its power from the constitution, and neither the center nor the state can amend the constitution its own. Just like that, you cannot do that. Okay, so that is one of the most important feature of what federal government. But is that the case in India? See, when we discuss about arguments in favor and arguments against, we'll say that. Okay, so to some extent it is rigid. The next point you can see, rigid constitution, supremacy of the constitution, rigid constitution. So Indian constitution, if you see, to some extent it is rigid. You cannot amend just like that, right? There are certain cases, there are 5. In fact, I will be discussing all the 5 if today itself. There are 5 areas where you need the permission from the state also for the amendment. Okay, but in other cases it is totally flexible. So when we discuss about federal government, the main feature is rigid constitution. But when we discuss about arguments in favor and arguments against, we will say there are some elements, mainly 5, where we are rigid because we need 2/3 of the majority, the special majority from the parliament, and after that the state also has to be passed by 50% of the state also has to be passed by the simple majority, with the simple majority. So in that context, some are rigid, but many cases, even changing the name of the states and boundaries, those are, even the states don't have any say. On a sudden day, even the parliament can make laws by changing, the name of the state or alter the boundaries, etc., even with the simple majority. So in those lines, it is flexible. I'll come to that. What is rigid provisions? What are the flexible provisions, etc. Okay. Apart from the 5 which I have told you, all others are in fact flexible. So our constitution is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. This I have discussed last days. That's the reason why I've just taken it now. Okay. So when we discuss about arguments in favor, arguments against, we will do that in detail. On the other side, in case of unitary, it can be rigid or flexible, right? Both are okay. Independent judiciary, one of the most important feature of federal setup. Why you need independent judiciary? Because any otherwise, if you see, if judiciary is not there, the dispute between center and state, nobody will be there to take care of it. So independent judiciary is actually required. On the other side, it can be independent, it may not be independent. Bicameral legislature like Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. Why? Rajya Sabha mainly representing the state. So anything which is going to affect the interest of the state, the Rajya Sabha can defend that. So that will also very important for the federal setup. Okay. On the other hand, it can be unicameral or it can be bicameral. So these are the main elements. So if you see, if you look from theoretical perspective, federal government has to have these setup, unitary government has to have these setup. But now when we look from Indian's perspective, Indian constitution perspective, you will see some of them showing this federal tendency, some of them are showing the unitary setup. Okay, so we need to discuss all these in detail, then the things will be very clear. So if you look into the second one, written constitution, do we have the written constitution? Yes, we have the written constitution. So in that way, we can say one of the most important feature to become or to substantiate or to say that our constitution is federal or our government is federal setup, then this is satisfied. The first one, if it is written constitution, that is satisfied. Again, dual government is there, one at the central level, the other at the state level. So that two conditions are satisfied, right? And this dual government, when we say national government or the central government and the state government, both derive its power from where? Both derive its power from the constitution, and none are superior or inferior, right? They are just like acting as coordinating bodies. There is no superiority or inferiority. It's working as a coordinating body, and both are superior in their respective areas. Okay, so the first two conditions, you can clearly see that is satisfied. what about this one, fifth one, rigidity of the constitution? As I have told you, at least in those areas which are considered important, right? We are following that rigidity, because to make the changes you need some difficult process. So in that way it is rigid. But there are other areas where it is flexible that we need to look into. But as of now, you can see to some extent, at least in important areas, if you need to make some changes, it is slightly difficult. You need to follow special process like special majority, then the consent of the states, and all these are required. So in that way it is rigid. Okay, now what about the next one? Independent judiciary. Yes, we have the independent judiciary, and this independent judiciary is there that will look into the power distribution between the center and the state, and also what? They will take care of the dispute between the center and state. So independent judiciary, that also you can see. What about supremacy of the constitution? Now what you will write here? Supremacy of the constitution. When I say supremacy of the constitution, constitution is supreme. But if you remember, yesterday itself I have told you, on the other hand, in case of Britain and all, parliament is supreme. So here constitution is supreme. That means nobody can, it is difficult. Neither the state nor the center alone cannot amend the constitution, right? So there has to be some process which has to be followed, that we will see in the maybe in the 10th chapter, how to amend the constitution. Article 368 we will be discussing later. But see, if you need to amend at least 5 areas, 5 important areas. I don't have pen to write now here. What are those 5 areas? Article 54, 55. What is that related to? 54 and 55. This require the approval of center and state. Article 54 and 55. This is related to, guys, I will be discussing all these in detail later in the coming session. So here we are just discussing the nature of the constitution, whether it is federal or unitary. So what I'm saying here, this is going to come again later in the chapter of president. So this is actually related to the election of the president. So election of the president, here you need approval of center and state. I'm going to talk about this 5 areas where you need what? The center, at the same time state approval. For example, you need the center has to pass it. Once it is done with the special majority. When I say special majority, what does that mean? 2/3 of the majority. Once it is done, then you need to get the support of the 50% of states. The 50% of the states also need to be passed it by with a simple majority. Okay, so this is related to election of president. Now what about second one, Article 73 and 162? Any idea about these two? 73. See, Article 73 is actually the extent of executive power of union. Okay. Similarly, Article 162 is actually the executive power of the state. So in those cases also you need the, guys, everything is there in the PDF. Okay, so you don't want to worry, you don't want to write down all these things. Whatever is required, I'll tell you. Okay, so this 5, or you can just take down these articles, the 5 areas where you need the approval of both center and state. First one is related to Article 54 and 55. Okay, here 54 and 55. This is related to the election of president. And then Article 73, 162, we will be discussing about this in detail. 73 is related to the executive power of union. This 162 is related to the executive power of the state. Okay, then Article 241, we'll do that later when we discuss about high courts. This is in high courts in union territories. Then, so that's the first area. Second area, if you look into, this is related to Chapter 4 of Part 5. Okay, so what is Part 5 related to? Part 5 related to union, right? Part 5 related to union. Chapter 4 related to judiciary. So judiciary at the union level, what is that I'm talking about? I'm talking about, what is the judiciary at the union level? I'm talking about Supreme Court. Okay, so like the functioning of the Supreme Court or the working of the Supreme Court, appointment in the Supreme Court, in all these areas, if you need to bring some changes or anything, what do you need? You need the approval of the center. Okay, first you need the approval of the center, then 50% of the states as well. Okay, so center here you need 2/3 majority. This is what we have seen yesterday, special majority. Here, when it comes to the state, you need the simple majority. Simple majority means just more than 50%. Similarly, 50% of the state also need to support this. Okay, so that is the first one in the second category. What is the second one? Similarly, the judiciary at the state level, like chapter 5 of part 6. Guys, I'm not able to write it. I don't have pen. I'm just writing it with my finger. That's why I'm not able to do it properly. Tomorrow it will be okay. Okay, so chapter 5 of part 6. So part 6 is dealing with what? Part 6 is dealing with the states. Like part 5 I have told you, dealing with the union. Part 6 dealing with the state. Chapter 5 dealing with judiciary. So previously we have seen judiciary at the central level, Supreme Court. This is judiciary at the state level. What is that? I'm talking about High Court. So similarly, like what we have discussed before, the appointment, the functioning, the working of the High Court, if there is any modification or any change, again you need the approval of both center with the 2/3 majority, and then 50% of the consent of the state also is required. Again, in the second category, one more will come, that is chapter 1 of part 11. Chapter 1 of part 11. What is this part 11? This is related to the center-state relation. Guys, this is very important. We will have a separate discussion in detail. So whatever I am discussing here, we will be discussing again in detail separately. So in case if there is any problem, if I am saying part 11, if you cannot connect it, once we're done with these sessions, it will be printed in your heart. So you don't want to worry about that. So this is related to part 11 is related to center-state relation. Chapter 1 related to the legislative relation. Okay, so here I am basically talking about legislative relation between the center and state. So what all things I have discussed now? The first category I have discussed as the election of president and the extent of executive power of union, executive power of the state, high courts in union territories. Now I am discussing about related to Supreme Court, judiciary at the union level, judiciary at the state level, and legislative relation between the center and the state. So we have done with 2. I have told you how many? 5. Now the third one is related to the distribution of power. What do you know about that? The 3 lists, what are they? The 3 list is related to union list, right? State list, and then concurrent list. So here also, if you need to bring any change, what you need? You need the center plus the state support, or the approval is required. Center need to be approved with the 2/3 majority, state simple majority, and 50% of the state need to give the consent. Okay, union list, how many numbers are there? 100. Okay, so that we will see later also. 161, 52. I need to cross check if there is any change or not. Okay, then so that's about the third one. Fourth one related to the representation of states in parliament. Fifth one is related to the very constitutional amendment, that is article 368. Okay, all these. So what I'm saying, these 5 areas, if you need to make any changes or if you need any amendment, what is required? You need the special majority at the parliament. When I say special majority, means 2/3 of present and voting plus absolute majority. That is what you mean by special majority. So first you need this. After that, 50% of the state legislature have to give consent with a simple majority. Okay, simple majority means more than 50% of present and voting. Simple majority is more than 50% of present and voting, but 50% of the state have to give the consent. Center level, special majority, it has to be passed. Special majority means 2/3 present and voting, and absolute majority. Okay, so except in these 5 areas, other areas you don't want the permission of the state. Okay, so now what about flexibility and rigidity? We can say the same thing in this way. Our constitution is rigid. When I say rigid means in these 5 areas, if you need to make any amendment or change, the process is very difficult. But why it is flexible? All the other areas of constitution, the center can make any changes. Even the center can change the boundaries of the state, the name of the state, just with a simple majority. So in that way, the constitution is flexible. Okay, so our constitution is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. So when you see a lot of things are there, we have to discuss a lot of features, and I think most of them we have covered. Now we will see arguments in favor of unitary. That is again more important, guys. If you look into let's see US is a typical federal setup. Okay, now if you compare, what is most important there? Okay, so each state have their own constitution when it comes to US. So you compare that here. Do we have own constitution for states? No. Okay, so it is there in the PDF. Don't worry, you don't want to write down these points. But if something is not there, I'll discuss that. Okay, so you can just take down. So what is our federation? Our federation is, this is a word that you need to remember. Our federation is actually federation sui generis. That means something which comes into existence its own over a period of time. Okay, so we have different things. There are elements which qualifies to be federal. There are elements which qualify to be unitary. So even Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is also of the opinion that it is union of state. It has to be, see, the thing is, you see, go with the historical aspect. It took a lot of effort for integration also, and there is a lot of cessationist tendency. So it has to be like this union of state. Okay, so it depends on the time. It can change. It can be federal and it can be unitary. In case of any exigencies, in case of any emergency, it can act as unitary. Otherwise, in normal situation, it can act as federal. Okay, so already some cessationist tendencies there. So if you give a chance, if you make it completely federal, there may be demand for secession. So that should not be allowed. Okay, that is the reason why this is union of state. Okay. Now we will look into all these one by one. In fact, more supportive argument is there for unitary feature than the federal feature. So anything we missed out from federal feature? First one, dual polity. Okay, no doubt there. Written constitution, yes. Guys, you can read all these, not that important. And then division of power. I have discussed about these union list, state list, and concurrent list. So what about residuary power? When I say residuary power, it is with the center. What is residuary power? Residuary power is if there is something which is not coming under these lists, some new subjects, new topic is coming. Who can legislate? The residuary power is actually with the center. Okay, so residuary power is with the center. So what does that show? Is this federal or unitary? When we see from the otherwise itself, guys, if you see this division of power, where you see maximum is in the union list. What does that indicate? Is it federal or unitary? More in, you see union list, that means there is a unitary bias. Secondly, not only more in this union list, most important elements or the most important items or the subjects are also coming in union list. Now thirdly, if you see concurrent list also, there who's enjoying maximum power? Even though parallelly you can make, but central law will prevail in case if there is any discrepancy. So there also you can say unitary bias. So the very same point that you have written with respect to this division of power to prove or to say that we have a federal setup, the very same thing you can alter and you can write that there is a unitary tendency, that more elements are in the union list itself shows there is a unitary bias. Secondly, most important elements are coming in the union list, that also proves that there is a unitary bias. Thirdly, this concurrent list, if even though it goes concurrent means what? Parallel. It goes parallel, both center and state can legislate, but in case if there is any discrepancy between the laws made by the center and the state, the central law will prevail. Fourthly, the residuary power is with the center. So Which one? That means it is more of unitary. Okay, now let's come to supremacy of the constitution that we have discussed. Rigid constitution I have discussed. Rigid in some areas, like 5 areas, even the very same point is what we have discussed under supremacy of the constitution also. But otherwise it is flexible apart from that 5 areas. Guys, I am expecting that you might have taken down that 5 areas because I cannot see that here. Okay, independent judiciary, bicameralism. So all these are satisfying. So can we say it is federal in nature? Now we will look into the other dimension. Okay, so what are the other dimension? First one I have told you with respect to the constitution. Do the states have their own constitution? No. But in US, if you compare it with US, this is a typical federal setup, right? So when I say federation, we have to compare it with USA. We don't have own constitution. Now, in US, you will see dual citizenship, right? Do we have that? No, right? There is no dual citizenship. Then, guys, I'm expecting all of you know this Article 352. What is Article 352? National emergency. During the time of national emergency, what will happen? The distribution of power between the center and the state gets suspended. Okay, so then what will happen? The center will take the power during the national emergency. Okay, so what is the conclusion? As per the need of the time, it can be federal or unitary. Okay, so what I've told you, the historical context of unification, we have struggled a lot to unify the states and to consolidate into this single entity, and also there is a lot of cessationist tendency. Because of that reason, what is actually required in the larger interest of the country, this unitary bias to an extent is required. Okay, so other elements you can say all these one by one you can take and you can explain. Otherwise, what about this Article 3? Just note down this Article 3 also. What is this Article 3? This is again very important. This proves the strong center. What is Article 3? Article 3 actually is related to the Parliament can change the names, area, boundaries of the state even without the consent of the state. Okay, so on a sudden day, even if the Parliament can change the name of the state, alter the boundaries of the state. Okay, so what does that mean? The state do not enjoy that, any right over this. So even the state do not have claim on their own boundary or their own name. That shows the strong center or strong unitary bias. Okay. Okay, here different thing is what written, but you can write here Article 3. This one I have already explained. This point, division of power, this 3 list I have already explained, right? So the union have more subjects. Okay, secondly, most important subjects. Thirdly, concurrent list, also the center enjoys the power. And fourthly, residuary power. Okay, now even the financial distribution also, can I see that here? Financial distribution also, the state is more dependent on the center. Okay, we will look into these elements. States not indestructible, that is self-explanatory. Single constitution, yes. So in US, if you see, there is constitution for the state also. Flexibility of constitution. So just before I've told you, constitution is rigid when we were supporting the arguments in favor of federal setup, but when we are discussing about unitary setup, we have to say that our constitution is flexible. There are different areas where the constitution is flexible, right? Even that Article 3 also you can write here. Without the consent of the state, you can change the name of the state. Okay, emergency provisions. Okay, the power of the state will go during emergency. Or at the same time, you see during president rule also, like that is under 356, when the president rule is imposed, what will happen? The state legislative assembly may be suspended or even dissolved. Okay, so who is more powerful? Again, center is more powerful. Or what will happen when president rule is imposed? Immediately the council of minister gone. The state legislative, guys, I will be discussing about this all emergencies in detail in maybe next to next session. Once we're done with preamble and fundamental rights, I'll be discussing that. Immediately the council of minister is gone, and then state legislative assembly may be suspended. It may be dissolved also. Okay, so center enjoy power over there. Single citizenship I have mentioned. Integrated judiciary. Okay, and then all India services. Integrated audit machinery, and there are a lot of criticism from the state side also that they are unnecessarily interfering in the state aspects. Then appointment of governor. Who's appointing? The president is appointing, and he is acting as the agent of the center. So you can control the state and the affairs of the state through the governor, which is appointed by the center. Similarly, integrated election machinery. The election commission is conducting the election both for this central level election as well as the state level election. So the election commission is appointed and even removed by the center. So veto over state bills. Governor can reserve certain type of bill to the president, right? And what the president can do, president can send back. Okay, and once it is passed again, it has to go to president. That in this case there is no suspensive veto. You might have read, you might have studied, in case of at the central level, if parliament is passing something and president is sending back, and if it is the same passed by the parliament again, then the president have to give an assent, right? So there is a suspensive veto, but here the president enjoy absolute veto with respect to the state. Okay, I'll be discussing in the chapter of president what you mean by suspensive veto, what you mean by absolute veto, everything. So in the case of state, the president enjoy absolute veto. So see, governor, you are appointing the governor. So some bills which is passed by the state, the governor can reserve it to the president. President can send back for reconsideration. Once it is passed again, it has to go to president, not to the governor, and president can use absolute veto. There is no suspensive veto if it is sent back again. That's not the case with the center. Okay. Now guys, 2-3 points you can take down here. Apart from this, Article 249. Just take down this Article 249. What is this Article 249? See, Article 249 is related to this only. If Rajya Sabha with the special majority pass a resolution. What is required? Rajya Sabha pass resolution with special majority. What does that mean? 2/3 of the majority of present and voting. Now, Parliament can legislate on state subject in the national interest. Is very important point. Just write down. This was asked in mains also before. Under Article 249, in what circumstances center can legislate on the state subject? This is one important point that you need to remember. Article 249, what is that? When Rajya Sabha passes resolution with a special majority in the national interest, the parliament can legislate on the state list. Okay. Now how long this law will prevail? 1 year. Okay. And can it be renewed? It can be renewed any number of times. What about Article 250? Article 249 is done. 250, that is again very important. Article 250, during national emergency, what will happen is Parliament assume concurrent legislative jurisdiction over the state subject. So when I say concurrent legislative jurisdiction means what? State legislature is there, okay? The Council of Ministers and all is there during, I'm talking about national emergency. But when I say president rule, Council of Minister is gone. But national emergency, Council of Minister is there, the state legislative assembly and all is there. Not they will also enjoy the right to pass the bills at the same time. The parliament, there is a concurrent legislative jurisdiction. Okay? During national emergency. So 249, 250, very important in this context. What this proves? This proves there is a strong unitary bias. 249 says if Rajya Sabha says with the 2/3 of the majority in the national interest to legislate on the state subject, Parliament can do that, and that will be valid for 1 year. 250, when there is national emergency, Parliament will have a concurrent legislative jurisdiction over the state subjects. Okay, one more, Article 252. What is this? This is again very important. See, if Article 252, for example, some states are facing some common threat, okay, but the states with their effort, it is very difficult to control that threat. For example, when you talk about Naxalism, okay, in some areas, so for example, some 8-7 states are facing the problem, okay, so there's a common problem for the states. So the states' effort is not working well. So what the states can do here is 2 or more state legislature pass a resolution authorizing the Parliament to legislate on a state subject. Even police is a state subject. So in this context, even the state legislature can ask the Parliament to legislate upon that particular state list. Then Parliament will get the legislative jurisdiction over the state subject of that states. So it's not for all the states. Those states which have been asked for the same, okay, the Parliament will get the legislative jurisdiction over that state. Okay, and this law will remain in place till the time it will be repealed by the Parliament. Now once the Parliament passed this, so once they have passed the resolution to give the control or the right to Parliament to legislate upon this, then their role is over. Now once the law is made, this law need to be repealed by whom? Not by the state. Now the state have no role with respect to that subject. This law, if it is made by the Parliament, now only the Parliament can repeal that law. Okay, so I hope this is clear. 249, 250, 252. These three I hope are clear. Guys, these are asked in mains. Okay, 2010 it was asked, 2013 also it was asked. Directly, this too was asked. No, when I say special majority, it is special majority always comes along with 2/3 of present and voting plus absolute majority. Okay, so 249, 250, 252. Now we will discuss about 253. What is that 253? This again shows the strong unitary bias. 253 is like this only. Parliament can pass law on state subject with or without the consent of states. In which case, if there is an implementation of national or international treaty. Guys, excuse me for writing this because I am writing it with my hand. I am not having that pen with me today. So this is a very simple one, right? 253, if you need to implement any international treaty, Parliament can directly legislate with or without the consent of the state. No need of the consent. That also shows what? Strong unitary bias. Okay. So 249, 250, 252, 253. I hope this you can remember. What about 355? I hope this everybody will remember. Everybody might be knowing. 356 is what? President rule, right? So 356 is president rule, then this is related to president rule only. So if there is a president rule which is imposed on the state, what will happen? I've told you just before, Council of Minister anyway gone. What will happen with the state legislative assembly? It may be suspended or may be dissolved also. Initially it will be suspended, initially it won't be dissolved, but later it can be dissolved also. Okay. Now, why initially it is not suspended, it is not dissolved? Guys, I will tell you in detail regarding this when it comes to the president rule, because initially it is not suspended, because they will see is there any opportunity to form the government again even without contesting, or conducting new election like that. So keeping that probability, okay, it will be suspended for some time to solve that problem, whatever it is there. If it is not possible, then it will be dissolved. I will discuss that in detail later. As of now, just see these important points. Okay, 249, 250, 252, 253, 355. Then I've already told you about this residuary power. Which article is talking about that? Article 248. Okay, what are the three lists? Union list, state list, concurrent list. Okay, union list, the center will make laws. State list, state will make the laws. Concurrent list, parallel, concurrent, both will make the laws. And the center law, if it is in contradiction with the state, central law will prevail. There is one more list, that is a list 4. There is list 1, list 2, list 3, list 4. Now, there's a new area which is not coming in any of this. See, over a period of time, the situations are changing, developments are coming. So, new areas will emerge, right? So, here who is having the right to legislate? The center. The residuary power is with the center. Okay? So, guys, when you study history, when you see Jinnah's 14 points, in that he is talking about it has to be given with the province, the residuary power. And Nehru report, there it is giving to the center. So you will see from here again it is going to the center. What about USA? USA, the residuary power is with the states. What about Canada? Canada, it is with the center. And this federation with strong center, from where we have taken that? It is from the Canada. I've told you that already, right? Then we have discussed about this governor we have discussed. So you can write here article 155. Under article 155, governor is appointed by the president, and the governor hold the office during the pleasure of the president. So obviously through the governor, the center can influence the state administration. Okay, one more, this All India service we have discussed. Here also you write the article 312. Okay, so under article 312, Rajya Sabha can authorize the parliament to create one or more All India services. So Rajya Sabha can ask the parliament to create more All India services. Now All India services, then All India service officers are actually controlled by the center. The disciplinary action and everything is taken by the center. So obviously by creating and controlling the All India services, center can control the state. Anything else we left out discussing? So guys, any of this, I hope there won't be any problem. You can remember all these. If not, strong center anyway, single constitution, flexibility, okay, then emergency provision, you won't forget that here, single citizenship, integrated judiciary, independent but integrated. So, but you see in US separate judiciary is there, right? Even the Supreme Court at the state level is also there, but that's not the case with India. All India services, CAG, okay, then governor, election commission. Where is election commission? Just write article 324 here. Article 324, election commission. We will discuss election commission later. At that time also anyway we will cover the articles, but just write it here. So whenever you write an answer, write it along with the articles, so it will be appreciated. Okay, then there is one more, 256 and 257, not that significant, that's why I skipped it actually. What is this article 256 and 257? See, under this, the center can issue administrative directions to the states, like it will indicate the manner in which the railway properties and the means of communication should be maintained, and if the state is not able to comply with that, if these directions are binding on the states, they don't have any choice. Okay, what is that? How these railway properties and the means of communication shall be maintained. It is compulsory, and the state have to follow this. These directions are binding on the state, and if it is ignored, then what the center can do? Center can dismiss the state government under 365. Now here there are a lot of political scientists, Casey were quasi-federal. Okay, so you can go with any of these, but what is the best one? This one is the best one to use, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So I am not discussing that here, and you can also go through the Bommai case. So what Supreme Court assert here is, Supreme Court says it is the basic feature. What? The federalism. Federalism is a basic feature of the Constitution. Railways and communications related to that. Okay, now guys, from where this basic feature principle has come, in which judgment? For the first time it has come in Keshavananda Bharati case. I will be discussing about that in detail in the coming session. So this concept of basic feature doctrine was introduced in the Keshavananda Bharati case. Later all these points have added, the federalism, all these are added in the Minerva Mills case. Okay, so go with what Dr. Ambedkar is saying. That should be your conclusion. Different views are there. Quasi-federal is fine. Sui generis is fine. Some people will say extremely federal. No, not extremely federal. In fact, this is the better view. This is directly from Lakshmikant. You can just read this, and I hope you will understand everything now. Very important question from mains perspective. And if the question is asked, how will you write? First you need to explain what is the theoretical aspect of federal setup, what is the theoretical aspect of unitary setup, and then tell what are the arguments in favor of being federal, tell what are the arguments in favor of being unitary, and then you make the conclusion by saying it is quasi-federal or federalism sui generis or its own type of federalism. Okay, in normal times it is federal. In exigencies, in case of emergencies, it have to turn to a unitary level. Otherwise, this historical difficulties that we faced in integration of the states, at the same time, the strong secessionist forces which are present in the country. In this context, a strong center and a unitary bias is essential, and it is required in the larger interest of the country. That should be the conclusion. And you can say it's a federation with a unitary bias, and it's a union of states. Okay, so that's about this session. Any doubt we can discuss now.